Good afternoon. We're saving the best for last, and we've got a wonderful panel. Ida Chipola, she's Chief Financial Officer at Ontario Power Generation. Arthur Katzer-Park, Treasurer at Hydro One, and David Krant, Chief Financial Officer of Infrastructure at Brookfield Asset Management. To start off, just give us a brief background, a snapshot of like where you're coming from in your company.
Yeah, no, for sure. So at Ontario Power Generation, or I'll refer to it as OPG, we are the largest power generator in the province of Ontario in Canada, and but we are one of the most diverse power generators in North America. And so our fleet of assets include 2 nuclear power plants, our Darlington power plant, as well as our Pickering power plant. We have 66 hydroelectric facilities. We also have a solar facility and thermal plants. And we also have a subsidiary called Atura Power, where we have 4 natural gas turbine generators, or our natural gas fleet. We're also doing battery storage, 250 megawatts. We have a hydrogen pilot project where we're doing green hydrogen through Niagara Falls, our hydro station. And then we also have a subsidiary in the United States. We're in 19 states throughout the U.S., where we have 85 hydroelectric operations, plants, including now some community solar here in the U.S. And so really sort of diversified and looking to continue to grow as we go through the energy transition. So thank you very much for having us here today.
Arthur?
Right. Well, first of all, thank you for having us here today, and fitting that I actually follow after Ida, because we're a utility operating in the province of Ontario, a transmission and distribution utility operating in the province of Ontario. We do not have any generation. So Ida's OPG generates, we transmit the electricity. We only operate in Ontario. We're 99% regulated. We are publicly traded on the TSX, but we're still 47% owned by the province of Ontario. We have an A-rated balance sheet as well.
David?
Great. Thank you, Noreen. So Brookfield Infrastructure is probably one of the largest pure-play infrastructure public companies in the market today. We own assets across 4 key sectors: utilities, very similar to the types of assets my counterparts have mentioned, but also transportation assets, midstream, so typical natural gas transmission, and more increasingly digital or data infrastructure, which is a huge growing trend in our business.
Got it. And I'll just take a moment to say I encourage you to send questions. We can see it on the screen here, but no pressure. So I guess, 2024 has been about power demand growth. And so what excites you the most about it, or other infrastructure? Like, what's at the top of your list? And I have to ask, where does AI fit in there? It's like somewhere on that list.
Oh.
Ida.
Yeah. Oh, of course it is. So I think what excites us the most is this energy transition. For many of us, the energy transition is about an element of, yes, getting to net zero, yes, the energy stability and reliability that we need across all of North America, but the world for that matter, and energy security, but it's also about really having electrification completely put together. And so when you think about all of that, what you're seeing for the first time is real demand come in. For so long, we've been looking at conservation and elements of that through our sector in Ontario. And what we're now seeing is true growth coming in. We had projections in the province of Ontario of 2% real growth earlier this year. And just today, our independent electricity system operator released out their annual planning report for what they're now seeing, and it is looking as it's 4.6% increased in growth over the next decade. To put that into perspective, that's a 4% increase in the next 10 years. What that's talking about, and really earmarked here, is data centers. And so they're projecting 16 data centers, 1.6 gigawatts in that next decade. So 13% of that real growth is going to come from data centers in the next decade. And so the trend lines, and they had issued out a report back in December of 2022 called the Pathways to Decarbonization, and it played out a world of believing in net zero, no natural gas in 2050, and a world where you had electrification. And at that point, we're talking about a build-out in our province alone in Ontario of over $400 billion for the power generation and transmission, and the consideration of needing to double the grid. And so that, one could say 2 years ago, was a vision around what could be and where you're going to overbuild that. The growth is really here, and their model that came out today says that the near to medium term is underestimated in that long-term model. So I think it is here, and I think it's serious, and we really need to think about the reliability and how are we going to build that out. So things like small modular reactors, large nuclear, refurbishments of nuclear, increased hydro in the north of Ontario, and renewables, wind and solar, all of it. We're going to need all the tools in the toolbox.
I would say ditto to that, and it's that's all my thunder. But yes, we're seeing a real growth happening, and as the transmitter in Ontario, it's we're seeing firsthand. We actually have 9 transmission lines that have been commissioned or we've been asked to build, separate to our regular transmission maintenance and build out. Transmission lines just to actually support that growth. And to give you some maybe concrete examples, in southwestern Ontario alone, we're building 5 different transmission lines, and that's to support growth. One, for example, in the EV supply chain. So we have the likes of Volkswagen coming in and announcing a plant that's going to come in the town of St. Thomas. We got Stellantis, LG building a plant in Windsor. Honda just announced recently a new infrastructure investment into their EV manufacturing. So a lot of growth there. On top of there's a lot of growth around agriculture. So to put some numbers around it, just in southwestern Ontario, right now the demand is expected to grow from about 500 megawatts right now to 2.1 gigawatts, almost 4 times the expansion. And plus then we have growth. We're seeing growth in the north as well with the development in Ontario. We have the Ring of Fire. That's an area that's very rich in minerals. So there's obviously going to be demand around developing that area and getting transmission put out to support that. We have initiatives coming on board from electrification from some of our steel makers, both Dofasco and Algoma announcing electrification initiatives. So I echo all of that, and it's real, and we're seeing it as well.
Yeah, look, and I won't be repetitive. I'll try to at least, that's one perspective, I think, and it's extremely prevalent in all the markets. I think the U.S. is probably the leading indicator based on where these hyperscale customers are based. They've invested heavily in the United States first. And now you're going to start to see it ripple out into Canada. We have businesses in Australia, South America, and India where we're building data centers for these companies. And the opportunity set's massive. I think Google came out today with a 5 gigawatt plan for nuclear to power it. I'd say that's longer term. This is 2030, 2039 their targets are. I think the one element I would add is that we're very firm believers that, and from talking to our customers, is they need capacity tomorrow. So lead time is extremely valuable. And for our customers, having access to power today is what's really important. Yes, they need these projects 5 years from now, but they also need demand tomorrow. And the only way to do that today is with natural gas. And I think you're starting to see a renewed optimism around natural gas, especially in the United States and also in Canada, just given our mineral-rich economies, that I think that's a huge tailwind in the near term for businesses that have a bit of a diversified mix like ourselves, like OPG.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in on that, and I think there was an announcement today as well with Amazon around X Energy, so their partnership around that and an investment in looking at Energy Northwest and building out the small modular reactors, a minimum of 4 up to 12, because of that need of the data centers. So you see that with Amazon earlier this week. You mentioned, David, about Google. There was also previously Microsoft with Constellation and 3 Mile Island. And so you're looking at this need for the actual data centers, the AI, and they need that continuous 24/7, 365 days continuous service. And so the question is how do we get there? Because I think it is real. You're absolutely right. It's United States that's sort of driving this, and then the peripheral around jurisdictions that can help. And so it's here and it's now. And there's that element about natural gas as well in that amount of being able to peak. And I think we're seeing that in sort of today's announcement in the province of Ontario. We're going to need to be able to have the power. You need the lights on. Like, it's an essential service.
Yep.
And we know that we need that for manufacturing, for businesses, for homes, and for us in our day-to-day lives. And so it comes, how are you going to do that? And so it becomes an important part of that while we build out the green electrification of the future through renewables, nuclear, and the various diversity.
Yeah, because don't forget, as much as these SMRs and nuclear is the base load, it needs backup. It can't only rely on that, because if it trips and their data center's down for a period of time, that's detrimental to their business. So we're seeing the utilities come to us say, well, we need gas as the backup. Can you connect a pipeline into our facility so we have that access in case there's maintenance requirements on the nuke? There's considerations for reliability that are extremely valuable that I think have been proven the last 3 or 4 years that I think people overlooked when the transition was maybe accelerating faster than people were ready for. And I think you're seeing the system and the grid start to catch up to that.
Can you even build gas right now? Like, where can you build it? Like, we've seen a lot of backlash in the U.S. for, like, getting permitting issues or pipeline costs that got too high,
Yeah.
that projects got canceled. And of course, there's this big ask to build a lot of gas generation, and there's like a 4+ year wait on combined cycle turbines right now.
Yep.
What can get done practically?
It's a nuanced question because I think it depends on the state and the regulation and the political environment of where you're operating. I think that's the reality of natural gas, is it is more political. And same with nuclear. It's going to have the same politics around it. So I think it's having the long-term view that these will be needed elements to the energy grid that I think hopefully people can work together to come to the right holistic solutions that includes all of it, rather than picking winners and losers and subsidizing those types of industries. I think we'll naturally need a bit of all of it, and finding the right permitting regulatory framework to get new projects started will be key.
Yeah, and maybe what I can add to that is, so if we look at the province of Ontario, we've been doing refurbishments at our Darlington new nuclear power plant, $12.8 billion project, 4 units, on time, ahead of schedule. And then at the same time, Bruce Power is also doing their refurbishment as well. So we have been off having nuclear. We have half of our Darlington plant is currently in refurbishment. We'll bring another unit back by the end of the year. But we need natural gas. And so what would have been 10 to 12% of the grid being on natural gas for peaking in those summer months when you really needed to, it's hit up to 25%. Just in base generation, because we need it as we do and we build those.
And if you don't have it, think of the prices.
Exactly. Now, the one element with that, though, I think also comes in, and we will be building another natural gas plant. And so where it's being done, we've now entered into another agreement for 411 megawatts to build out at one of our current gas, to be able to have the power during these periods of refurbishments. As we build out our hydroelectric, as we do refurbishments, we need to have that stability in there in that next decade when we'll have all the green power. So I think, to your point, it is jurisdictional.
Yeah.
It is going to be, I mean, we're very blessed that we're in a province that is a big nuclear supporter in certain areas. We have a big support around that. And I think it's about being able to get to that end state by keeping the lights on.
Arthur, one of the big stumbling blocks for the transition or even getting new power on is the interconnection queue. How do you even manage that? Because you're responsible for your territory to bring online new projects. What's your queue look like, and are you doing anything different?
We have, like I said, we're building out 9 transmission lines right now, priority transmission lines, soon to be 10 potentially. That might be added to the mix, and potentially others in the future as well. So look, transmission does take time to build out. There is certainly obviously permitting and so forth that needs to be considered into that. You know, the good news is as we think about building out transmission, we are looking at ways to shorten. I'll give you an example. Our most recent line that we're about to put into service in the southwest, the Chatham by Lakeshore line, we're actually coming in about a year ahead of budget on that line. And that's a lot of it was actually due to simple things like, for example, streamlining permitting, right? Having the federal and the provincial permitting instead of having sequentially happening concurrently. So things like that need to be kind of thought through, because it does take time to build transmission. It certainly does.
And just to follow up on that, you mentioned permitting. I mean, there's been a lot of community backlash for basically everything. It used to be oil pipelines, gas pipelines, and now it's like plants and even data centers. How have you built a coalition to support your projects?
Yeah, so one of the things that Hydro One is actually a pioneer in is actually Indigenous participation. So one of the things Hydro One is offered is any new transmission line, the transmission component of that line that's in excess of $100 million, we're offering 50% Indigenous participation. So a lot of these transmission facilities are being built across traditional Indigenous lands. So that itself is a win-win partnership, right? It helps to some extent with some permitting and so forth, but also allows for a genuine benefit to the communities that those lines cross, and allows those communities to participate in the ownership of those lines. So it's a win-win model for us.
Yeah. And if I could just jump in, I think, speaking alongside Arthur at Ontario Power Generation, we recognize the importance of our Indigenous communities, how we partner, and how we look at being partners together. At OPG, we announced $1 billion over the next decade to recognize how we support the economic benefits of Indigenous communities. And so it is about providing them opportunities to be within the supply chain process, getting jobs within those communities. How do they procure? How do they come in? How do we employ to have representation at OPG of employees? And we also recognize equity participation is going to be be important on our projects and anything that we do from a consideration in a greenfield. But it's about understanding what those communities need, and so in understanding how we partner together, that we have that jointly together, listening, being educated, and reflecting on what that means. And so we spend time in the communities, our Indigenous relations team. It's really important that you hear, you listen, and you learn, and I think that's been very important for us as an organization.
And David, you mentioned that like the backlash that gas has seen will likely translate to nuclear. What are some of the lessons learned, and are you doing anything proactive? Because you're also in nuclear as well.
We're not yet.
Like them to.
Our sister company, Brookfield
Yeah.
Renewable, owns a piece of Westinghouse. So that's our direct exposure there through the Brookfield universe. But I'd say the natural gas, in terms of the question around nuclear itself, look, I think it comes down to financing right now. So it helps when you're a government entity to have that kind of capital available and that long-term vision for your constituents. As a public company, it is a lot. I think the question it comes down to is financing, and who bears the risk around new development. So we don't have answers, and we don't have a way of adapting to that yet, but that's where I think you'll see evolutions now. Now that you're seeing a lot more commercial acceptance for these types of projects, I think you'll see a lot more first movers in terms of leading financing, capital structuring, risk sharing arrangements that can help get these projects in the ground and started. But I think that's the biggest hurdle right now, is how you manage that risk.
Consumers are facing rising costs and likely going to go up as we see all these transmission projects and generation projects get completed. And there's a lot of concern that the hyperscalers coming in that will significantly increase demand very quickly are going to just add to that burden. What is the role of the hyperscaler in this energy transition, or do they have to take a different, take more risk? Like, what's changing, like the relationship?
I'll start and feel free to elaborate on, but I think you are seeing some new frameworks come to market that you wouldn't have seen in the past when you had a traditional industrial user come onto the grid, because the hyperscalers have competing demands, I would say, that are mutually exclusive at the time being. That is growing their critical revenue generating models and technology, which is the forefront of their business, and also committing to net zero, which they've done on accelerated timelines. Like, I think some of them are as soon as 2026, believe it or not, which is fantastic for them. But in the current energy landscape, it's almost impossible. So I think you're seeing them do two things. One, come up with nuclear as part of that path. They're doing large arrangements with renewable power companies like Brookfield on that front. And you're seeing them jointly approach utilities and constituents and talk about, ways in which they can get access to power, but not have the tariff go necessarily straight to the user. So they may have to subsidize the power in that market. And that, again, is going to be state by state, regulated by regulator, those discussions. But you're seeing that framework come together where they're going to be more of a partnership in terms of how they get access to the power, but also not take up critical load from local universities, hospitals, residents that need the power as well.
Maybe just to add on to that, I think the way that we look to finance nuclear is going to have to be different than what we've done in the past. And so much of this is going to have to be how we consider elements around that. And so one of the big things for us at Ontario Power Generation was about talking about, and in response to, from a federal government point of view, the IRA here in the United States. And so in Canada, investment tax credits now originally were looking to be invested specifically just for small modular reactors. It has been expanded into scope into small modular reactors, new nuclear refurbishments, and on the renewable side, energy, pump storage, battery storage, all of the things, effectively everything that OPG is working on. Investment tax credits of 15% are going to be eligible. And so you take that off of the cost of the cost of the actual infrastructure build out, and that reduces electricity rates. So it goes back down to the customers, and that's a direct commitment that we've made, and through the legislation that would go back to customers. It's about how do we do this from a financing point of view. On our small modular reactor that we're building out at the Darlington new nuclear site for 300 megawatt firm clean or base load generation, we had just shy of $1 billion from the Canada Infrastructure Bank low cost financing. And so we have to think about these things different. We have to entice private capital. We have to think about ways, our equity participations with Indigenous communities. So we have to think outside the box. There's federal and provincial agencies that are looking to provide opportunities for first of a kind technologies and advancement. And so we're looking at all of those things. We recognize affordability is critical right now and very very important. And we have to be a prudent operator. At the end of the day, we're 100% owned by the province of Ontario. We have to always remember ratepayers. That is the number one person that we represent. And so cost of that and low-cost financing has to be a big part of that. And so it is something we deal with every single day as we think about the regulatory regimes that we need to modify and change. And there's various illustrative examples. Virginia, their governor announced ways to think about bringing forward some advancement of cash flows. Also in the UK around Sidewell C, the way in which the government's supporting that. So this needs to be a different inflection point than we've been in the past with how much capital needs to be deployed in the period to get to where we need to.
Historically, energy build-out has happened in silos, different regulators for different pieces of the business, oil, gas versus power. And Ida, you mentioned before this panel to me that you have to think about the whole energy wallet and the shift happening. How do you have those conversations, or what do those conversations look like so that you can get your projects, like get backing for them and get ratepayer approval when more of it's shifting towards that bill, utility bill?
Yeah, no, and I'm happy to start, and feel free to jump in. So in our mind, it's the energy wallet. So I think if you believe 2050 and you believe that there's an element of natural gas reducing, so some will believe that it gets eliminated, some jurisdictions will say that's 2035, 2040, 2050. You pick your period. We believe we need to decarbonize. I think we all recognize that. So once you get off coal, which we did a decade ago, the ability is to get to reducing down natural gas. And so with that, your natural gas costs should come down. If you believe in electrification and EVs, your gasoline costs are going to come down. And so you need to think about it as a total energy wallet. So as those come down, your electricity bill will go up. But you need to think about it as the net wallet over a period of time. And we need regulators to help us smooth out those costs so it is not all hit at one period of time for the actual consumers as we take that on. And I think that's where it's been conversations we haven't had in a very long time, considerations. And so it's different. So I think it's encouraging conversations like today where we can talk about the energy wallet and think about it holistically versus just each of us in a siloed view.
I agree with that. I mean, right now, electricity is only about 20% of the consumption versus other energy sources. So as you shift away from that total wallet, share of wallet would be an important conversation to have. And as the regulator, the government, all constituents need to be pulling on the oars at the same time to really get over this. Because there is going to be, I think, a period where it is going to cost more, right? It's going to be kind of like that inverse U, right? But eventually it should come down and actually probably should be cheaper as we do get over that inflection point.
Yeah. Look, and we can learn a lot from Europe. Like they are ahead of us. And in terms of energy transition, you have the UK with a much more aggressive net zero target. France, Germany had decommissioned sites that, and they saw what happened to energy costs in the last 3 years as well, right? So we can learn how they're doing it. Right now we're doing conversions of gas boilers in Germany and France and the UK to heat pumps. And yes, it is a capital outlay up front, but over time their energy bill is going to be much less reliant on commodity prices, which is really what gets people, and B is it's going to be predictable electric baseload that they'll be pulling on. So I think that we can learn from them too.
And then super rapid fire. This is the last question of the day. If there's so many challenges, if there's one thing you could change, if you had a magic wand, what would it be? David?
Oh, start with me.
Yeah.
Look, I think stability, we're long-term investors. We're investing in these assets for 10, 20, 30 years, no different than our counterparts. You need stable, long-term focused regulators, constituents that understand that so that they can respect capital and ultimately everyone can participate in this massive investment boom.
Yeah. I would say maybe on the theme we just talked about, and maybe not a change because we have a very supportive regulator right now, but I would say even more of that. More support from the regulator, more kind of alignment with government to be able to get us through the energy transition.
Yeah, and so I think with stability and the regulation, I think for me, what I would add to that is long-term planning. I think this cannot be a near-term view or focus. We have to think long-term, and when we can think long-term, we can plan correctly. These are long lead initiatives that you need to do for clean. It's nuclear, it's hydro, it's wind, it's solar, it's all of these things in the procurement cycle that you talked about. So we need to think long, we need to plan right, and not rush and make irrational decisions sometimes that you do in the short term. And so this is the time we need to plan correctly.
And with that, thank you so much for your insight. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.